evaluating risk on, risk off. Just make you understand what you can tolerate, not what your neighbor can tolerate, what you can handle, what's going to work best for your situation. So if you're young and investing in a Roth, you can be aggressive in terms of diversifying amongst a stock portfolio, for instance. But if you're about to retire, you have to reevaluate those risks. And the way that you've invested to accumulate your resources may not make sense for the second half of life or when you're going to actually need to spend those resources. Hello, and welcome to the Prairie Fire Podcast. We're so happy to have you here today. Recently, we've been examining pop culture from the 1980s and relating some of those dynamics into finance and into life. And recently, we talked about the Breakfast Club and how those 5 kids went through the challenges of high school, relationships, socioeconomic differences, and related all that to some good life and personal finance lessons. And so we're going to continue that series today. If you can see my t-shirt, it says Negative Ghost Rider, the pattern is full, from the great movie that we all have come to know and love, which is Top Gun. Many lessons could be learned from Top Gun. It was a story about a young man kind of coming of age in a very stressful profession, which is being a fighter pilot for the Navy. Looked at the relationships that he had, the challenges that he did, looked at different things like competition and leadership, as well as things like and concepts like teamwork. And so the challenge for Maverick, as he was known in this movie, was bringing his risk into a level that would work for the team. So you can't just be risk on all the time, which is something that we're going to talk about. You can't do everything alone, also something that we're going to discuss. And the essence of competition and some of those things require some discipline and consistency. I want to take all of that and wrap it into some personal finance lessons that we can take and also things that we can take into our life. So the 3 themes I'd like to discuss in terms of Top Gun and our lives is risk on and risk off, using discipline in our financial matters and our life matters, and then teamwork and the importance of all of that. So the first thing here we look at is risk. The first thing I say when I talk about the word risk is likely you're thinking about the stock market and those kind of things. But Maverick in his movies was known for his risky flying style. And he also had a lot of confidence in taking those risks. So just like his flying, we have to decide what kind of risks we can afford to take and which ones we cannot. So in Maverick's world, a big mistake would lead to someone passing away or death, the ultimate sacrifice. And so we're not talking about that here, but in every case in our life, whether it's investing, whether it's walking out the front door, we are taking on risk. Investing is no more than just buying risk. You're buying risk with the expectation of a return. So we have to understand what our tolerance is for that risk and what some of the potential outcomes might be. So when Maverick had his plane flipped over and he's flipping off this guy from the other country, he was taking a big risk because he thought it was worth a big reward to show them we're not afraid of you. We have what we need to defend our country, and I want you to go away. So while he did it in a very vivacious fashion, he was showing what it means to have risk on. So for us, we need to understand what our risk profile is. I've met with thousands of investors over the years, and in doing their financial plan, many say, especially I would think back to like the late 90s, everybody said, I want to be aggressive. I want to invest in tech. I want to invest in internet startups. And why not? They're going through the roof. You didn't need a financial advisor to tell you anything about investing. All you had to do was open a E-Trade account, buy a bunch of e-toys and Amazon, and off you go. Well, we all know how that turned out. And then we went through the 2008 through 2010 mess with all the banking crisis, and people that felt they wanted to be aggressive became very, very conservative. Please put me in cash. Get me somewhere safe. This is just way too painful. So you have to understand your risk profile and understand that in many cases, what may have worked for you in the past may not work for you now. We talk in investing a lot about diversifying, but it doesn't just mean in investments. In a lot of cases, we can get very overconfident in our financial decisions and take on more debt than perhaps so we should. Or we can put ourselves in a situation with starting a business that we didn't plan out very well. So one of the best ways to mitigate risk is to plan and to diversify. So if you're going to become a real estate investor, great, go for it. Do the due diligence, find the right properties, figure out the smartest financing, and then understand that diversifying outside of just real estate might also make some sense. But if you're just going to put all of your eggs in one commercial real estate property, for instance, you're putting yourself at a lot of risk. You may not be able to get your money out of that property, those kind of things. And so if you're willing to take that, if you can afford that risk, then that's something that you should know. Say, I can handle this. If this goes bad, I've made contingency plans and I can look to that. But in a lot of cases, when we invest in something or when we make a financial decision, we can have overconfidence, or we can have what I call recency. I don't call it, but the word is recency bias. And what that means is that recently something has happened, like for instance, crypto going from 30,000 in Bitcoin to 60,000. So recently, well, it doubled. Why wouldn't I believe that that's going to happen again? So I put a lot of resources into something that may not be the case, and I've been overconfident. Early in my career, early in my investing days, I had a Roth IRA, and I was believing all the technology myths out there. I was believing that I should really concentrate my risks inside of this account. And so I bought a company called Enron and a company called McLeod. And as everybody on this call knows, those companies aren't around anymore. So my overconfidence that I knew something that was going to lead to these companies doing better, when in essence I was an investor like everybody else, led to a poor financial decision. And so when we're evaluating risk on, risk off, just make you understand what you can tolerate, not what your neighbor can tolerate, what you can handle, what's going to work best for your situation. So if you're young and investing in a Roth, you can be aggressive in terms of diversifying amongst a stock portfolio, for instance. But if you're about to retire, you have to reevaluate those risks. And the way that you've invested to accumulate your resources may not make sense for the second half of life, or when you're going to actually need to spend those resources. So be thinking about that. Is in many cases, am I still investing like I'm 30, even though I'm now 60? Or vice versa. Am I investing like a 60-year-old, even though I'm 30 and can afford to take a little bit more risk? So evaluating this continues to be really important. All right. So for Maverick, he always did his risk return, and many people never agreed with it. His instructors, his teammates all thought he was a risk. You're dangerous, is what Iceman told him. And so one of the areas that he did deploy that he didn't get a lot of credit for was discipline. And so here we have Penny Benjamin, and she was his love interest. In the first movie, we never got to see Penny because all they talked about was that he did a drive-by with the admiral's daughter in the plane, and this turned out to be Penny Benjamin. And then in the second one, he had Penny along with him, and they became friends and reacquainted and were part of the whole Maverick scenario. So in his relationships, when it was his wingman or when he became an instructor, especially in Maverick, he did show a lot of discipline and consistency. And you can't get great at becoming either an investor or dealing with your financial affairs without a little bit of discipline. So whether it's setting up a budget or doing just a little bit more savings, if you haven't read the book Atomic Habits, I can't recommend it enough, but he talks a lot about doing things 1% better. And so in this case, it would be figuring out 1% better ways to save, 1% better ways to pay down debt, 1% better ways to help the people around you make better financial decisions. So in Maverick's case, he put a lot of discipline into when he became an instructor and taught these kids how to fly into a very specific risky mission. And he did it by showing them exactly how to do it. And that required a lot of discipline and a lot of consistency. And that is another great lesson that we got from Top Gun and Maverick.
I feel the need for speed. Ow!
I mean, we all remember that so well, that scene when he was with Goose and they were talking about hitting the planes and a need for speed and once again applying a lot of risk and those kind of things. And so one of the lessons that I really took from Top Gun and from Maverick was the importance of teamwork. And so Maverick needed his wingman. And in many cases, they talked about you never leave your wingman, one of the lessons that they stressed out. And I don't know what it's like to be a pilot, but I can only imagine that it's very high stakes. And if you're not willing to be a teammate and get help from others, you can very much end on the bad end of all of that. So when it comes to finance and in life, collaboration can come from working with advisors, mentors, maybe even family members when you're making your decisions. What I find is that a lot of people have blind spots, myself included. And so as you're moving about life and you're doing your work and you're making your decisions, in a lot of cases, you can have a blind spot that says, this is a certain way something's supposed to be done. Like, I should never take on debt. Generally speaking, that's good advice. But in some cases, if you're looking to expand a business, if you're looking to invest in real estate, some of the different things that require taking on a little bit of debt, if you talk to a CFO of a large company, they're going to always have some sort of debt tolerance in there. So I just bring that up as one thing that maybe is a blind spot for you. I think as I have conversations with my team here at Prairie Fire, occasionally they'll point out, well, I don't think what you're seeing is this, or perhaps this client feels that way about this, not the way that you're seeing it. And so when it comes to our financial affairs and our life in general, getting some professional guidance can be really helpful. And I'm not talking about just hiring a financial advisor. I'm talking about CPAs, attorneys, other coaches, other people in your network that can help. And these partnerships can also create great opportunities for joint ventures, ways to share ideas and communication, sharing a vision. And so, as parents, in many cases, sharing the vision of what we want to do for our family is a great example of teamwork, where we're saying, I want you kids to understand this is how we've done things, mistakes that we've made along the way, and things that we can learn from. You know, we talk frequently about college planning here at Prairie Fire, and I always bring it back up to my kids as they're anticipating someday having children and saving for that, is to make sure you come in a lot more educated when you're making big financial decisions and getting a team around you that understands the dynamics of these different areas that may not be your bailiwick. So Maverick had to have teamwork. He had to have a team around him to do his job and to accomplish his mission, both in Maverick the movie and in Top Gun the movie. Without his wingman, he couldn't get it done. In both cases, they saved his life. And so the same is true for us. And the other is the discipline then of having partners around you, people that you can share ideas with, and remembering that negative ghostwriter, the pattern is full. So, all right. So the danger zone is where we end up. And so as we've looked at discipline and risk, this movie was a great metaphor for risky financial behavior, but also how you can bring some of the lessons of things that you maybe don't want to do into life, and things like high debt, speculative investments, not having enough emergency savings, things like that. So to avoid the danger zone, I really encourage you to seek out mentors and partners that can help you in the financial journey. Definitely when you're going through volatile markets like we're beginning to see now, it's good to have partners that can help you with all that. So Top Gun was a great movie. There was so much to be learned from there and so many great ideas and lessons, and it's just fun. It was a fun adventure to live with Maverick, and then to see the second phase of that as he moved on. But in the 80s, as we all watched this movie, I feel like we learned a lot. We learned a lot about ourselves. We learned about areas maybe we did want to take some more risk in our lives. But then we also learned about the important concept of discipline and teamwork. So I want to thank you all for joining us here today at the Prairie Fire Podcast. We are doing the best that we can to fuse money and meaning, and helping the meaningful decisions that you make in your life matter, and helping you find your way through the financial mazes that are all out there. And hopefully this fun look at things like Top Gun and The Breakfast Club can be helpful in bringing the metaphors of those movies into your life. So if you'd like to become part of our network, please email us at info@pfwplanning. We can add you to our email list. We send out a notice every week that includes information about our podcast, newsletter on financial affairs, things like that. And then we also have a free copy of our book, Empty Nest Full Pockets, on our website at pfwplanning.com. So please join us there, and thank you so much for being part of our podcast today. Thanks.